Hey folks, in this episode I'm going to show you how to make this procedural cavity grime mask in the shader editor. Adding grime in your materials can significantly help improve photorealism in your renders. The mask itself is relatively easy to make, but I'll dive deeper to show you how to make this entire procedural material. So without further ado, let's get to it. Open up Blender. This is my scene here. All these objects, so the wall, the column, this cube, the sphere, and Suzanne all have the same material. I'll just expand this window. I'm going to go into my shader editor down here. And the material is just the principal BSDF. We are going to have to make this inside cycles. This will not work in eevee. Before we continue, go to Edit, Preferences, and under Add-ons, search for Node, and then enable the Node Wrangler here. Once you've enabled that, click this button and click Save Preferences, and that will ensure the Node Wrangler loads every time you load Blender. I'll then close this window. So with this wall, I'll just tab into edit mode so you can see the geometry. For the mortar, I've just got a plane, and each of these blocks is just a cube. I've added a bevel modifier and applied the bevel modifier, so the geometry is really simple. This is going to cause us problems later on, and I'll show you a solution how to fix that. With this column, I'll just tab into edit mode. This is the column. There isn't much geometry. This is the icosphere. Just tab into edit mode. It's quite a dense mesh. The cavity grime mask won't do much for this sphere. I've included it in the scene so you can see how the mask affects different objects. This is just a simple cube. This is Suzanne, the monkey, with a subdivision surface at level 2, which I've applied. And the floor and the background are completely separate materials. So we're only focusing on these objects here. So I'll select Suzanne, I'll navigate to my shader editor, and I'll rename the material to Cavity Grime and Dirt. I'll increase my shader editor. I'm going to hit numpad 0 to go into camera view. In the shader editor, I'm going to hit N to hide the N panel. I'll just zoom in. I'm going to go into rendered view. I have got an HDR for my background lighting. Also, if you want to create this wall with the wall factory, check out my previous tutorial, Procedural Weathering Shader Masks, and it will show you how to enable the add-on at the beginning of that tutorial. So I'm going to select Suzanne, the monkey. I'll hit Shift A, I'm going to go Input, and I'll choose Geometry. Shift A, I'm going to go Converter, and I'll choose Color Ramp. I'll then connect the pointless socket to the factor of the color ramp, and I'll connect the color from the color ramp into the base color of the principal BSDF. I'll change the interpolation type of my color ramp to ease. I'm going to select the black flag on the color ramp and set the position to 0.5. I'll then select the white flag, and I'll drag this across to around about here. Maybe I can set it to 0.525. The pointless mask works excellent if you've got geometry on your scene, but it's not working so well with this wall. It's not working so well with the cube or this column here. I'll just hit numpad 0 to go into camera view. I'll increase my 3D viewport, and to overcome this, I'm going to select this wall object over here. I'm going to navigate to my modifiers. I'll click Add Modifier, I'll go to Generate, and I'm going to choose Subdivision Surface. And as you can see, the pointless mask is now working. Excellent. And on our subdivision surface, if we increase the levels, we get a finer level of control. But for now, I'm going to set my levels for the viewport and the render to 1. I'll then select the column. Now I have got a subdivision surface on this column, but I don't want to increase the cuts because I don't want to subdivide the vertical vertices. I only want to subdivide the edges on this. So to get around this, I'm just going to increase the segments on my bevel modifier. Maybe I'll set it to 6. Okay. I now select my default cube over here. I'm going to click Add Modifier. I'm going to go to Generate, and I'll choose Bevel. I'll decrease the bevel amount to, let's say, 0.01. I'll increase the cuts to maybe 4. I'll then click Add Modifier. I'm going to go to Generate, and I'll choose Subdivision Surface. And I'll reduce the cuts on the render to 1. So all of these have got roughly the same kind of gradient. And now we can use the white flag on this color ramp to fine tune in the mask. So I'm going to keep it at 0.525 for now. Just going to zoom out. I'll increase the shader editor window. I'll just box select these two nodes here. I'm going to hit G. I'm going to bring them over to here. I'll then hit Shift A. I'm going to go Texture, and I'll choose Noise Texture. And I'll pop that underneath the geometry node. I'm going to change it from 3D to 4D. I'll increase the scale to, let's say, 12.5. I'll increase the detail to 8. And I'll increase the roughness to 0.75. With the noise texture selected and the node wrangler enabled, I'm going to hit Ctrl T, and that will add a texture coordinate and a mapping node. I'm going to change the coordinates from generated to object. I'll then hit Shift A, I'm going to go Converter, and we'll choose Color Ramp, and I'll pop that here. I'll connect the factor from the noise texture into the factor of the color ramp. I'll then hit Shift A, I'm going to go Color, and we'll choose Mix Color. I'm going to hold down Alt and I'll pop that there. I'll connect this color ramp into the factor of the mix color node. I'll then connect the color socket from this color ramp into socket B of the mix color node. I'll set socket A to black. On the mix color node, I'll change the mix type to add. I'll connect the result socket from this mix color node into the base color of the principal BSDF. I'm going to zoom in. I'll then select this color ramp down here, the one connected to the noise texture. I'm going to change the interpolation type from linear to ease, and I'll drag this black flag across to around about there. Maybe we can set it to around about 0.45. I'll then select the white flag on the color ramp, and I'm going to set this to 0.75. Okay, it's coming together. With this color ramp, with the white flag selected, I'm going to hold down Shift, left click and drag over the position to drag it in fine increments, and I'm going to drag it to, let's say, around about there. We don't want the spread to be too much, we only want this to happen on the absolute edges. So just play with this factor here until you've got a nice result. I'm going to go with, let's say, 0.59. We may need to adjust this a bit later on when we add other elements into the shader editor. I'll now box select all of these nodes. I'll hit F to add a frame, and I'll rename the frame to Cavity, Grime and Dirt Mask. Now that we've got this Cavity, Grime and Dirt Mask, we can use it to drive various different factors in the shader editor. We can use it to drive bump, roughness and colour. So let's start off with the colours. So I'll hit Shift A, I'm going to go colour, and I'll choose mix colour, and I'll pop that in between there. I'll connect the result from the mask into the factor of the mix colour node. For this top socket, I'm going to change it to kind of a grey, but maybe with a slight blue tone to it. Something around there perhaps, just to emulate stone. And for this bottom socket, I'm going to set this to like a dark green colour. And that's to emulate moss or mould. And now that we've done that, we've lost some of the detail. Now it's very hard to see the effect here. So we're going to have to adjust this colour ramp. And with the white flag selected, I'm going to set the position to 0.525. Starting to come into view here. Excellent. Maybe I can increase the brightness of socket A on this colour ramp, just so we can see what's happening. Okay, we're getting a bit of detail there. Excellent. Also, for this colour ramp, which is connected to the noise texture, I'm just going to drag this white flag back a bit. Maybe I'll set it to 0.65. Okay, we're getting some of our grime back again. Excellent. I'll just box select all of these nodes here. I'm going to hit G, just drag them across over to around about there. Now at current, the moss or the grime is just one colour, which is this green colour, and we don't want a flat colour, we want different shades of green. So I'll select this mixed colour node here, I'm going to hit Shift D to duplicate, and I'll pop that over here. For socket B, I'm just going to make this a bit darker. I'll then hit Control C and then Control V to paste that colour in that colour swatch. Maybe I'll have the top one a little bit darker, and the bottom one will have a bit lighter with a bit less saturation, something around there. I'll then connect the result from this mixed colour node into socket B of this mixed colour node. I'll hit Shift A, I'm going to go texture, and I'll choose noise texture, and I'll pop that over here. Shift A, I'm going to go converter, and I'll choose colour ramp, and I'll pop that here. I'll connect the factor from the noise texture into the factor of the colour ramp, and the colour socket from this colour ramp into the factor of the mixed colour node. I'll change the interpolation type from linear to ease. I'm just going to drag this black flag across all the way to around about there. I'll drag this white flag over to here. And for the noise texture, I'm going to set it to 4D. I'll set the scale to 15. I'm going to set the detail to 8. And I'll set the roughness to 0.75. Maybe I'll increase the distortion to 1. I'll then hit Shift A. We're going to go input, and we'll choose texture coordinate. And I'll pop that down here. I'll then connect the object coordinate into the vector of the noise texture. I'll just neaten these nodes up quick. I'll then select this colour ramp. I'm going to hit Control Shift D, and that will duplicate the node whilst maintaining the connection to the previous node. And I'll pop that up there. I'll just drag this black flag all the way across over to here. I'll drag this flag all the way to the end there. I'll select the black flag. I'll then go to the colour swatch. I'll click in there, and I'm going to increase the value to, let's say, 0.65. I'll then connect the colour socket from the colour ramp into the roughness of the principal BSDF. I'll hold down Shift, right click and drag through the noodle. I'll hit G, just bring this down to here. Hold down Shift, right click, drag through the noodle, hit G, and I'll just bring this up to here, just so we can see where it's going. I'm just going to zoom in to the grime. Maybe I'll drag this colour ramp back a bit. And there you can see we've got a bit of colour variation with the green. It's not just a flat colour. Excellent. So next up, we want a bit of variation in the colour of the wall. I want each block of stone to have a bit of variation in colour. So down here, I'm going to select this mixed colour node. I'm going to hit Shift D to duplicate. and I'll just pop that down there for now. I'll hover my cursor over colour swatch A. I'm going to hit Control C. I'll then hover my cursor over socket B. I'm going to hit Control V, and that will paste that colour. I'll select that colour, and I'm going to scroll my mouse wheel and bring it down a bit, just so it's a darker tone, maybe around about there. I'll then connect the result from this mixed colour node into socket A of this mixed colour node. I'm going to hit Shift A. I'm going to go Input, and we'll choose Geometry. I'll pop that there. I'll then connect the random per island socket into the mix factor of the mixed color node. Now this only works if you've got disconnected geometry. In fact, I think socket B is a bit too dark, so I'm just going to lighten this up a little bit, just so there's a slight bit of variation. I want to add a bit more color variation to these stone blocks, because at current, each individual block is a solid color, regardless of the fact that each block has a different tone. So to achieve that, I'm going to take this mixed color node, I'm going to hit Shift D to duplicate, and I'll pop this over here. For socket A, I'm just going to brighten this up a little bit. Maybe I can give it a tiny bit more saturation. For socket B, I'll just increase the saturation slightly, maybe increase the brightness. I'll then connect the result from this mixed color node into socket A of this mixed color node. I hit Shift A, I'm going to go Texture, and we'll choose Noise Texture, and I'll pop that down here. I'll change the noise texture from 3D to 4D. I'm going to change the scale to 10. I'll increase the detail to 8, and I'll increase the roughness to 0.75. I'll then connect the factor from this noise texture into the mix factor of the mixed color node. And finally, I'll connect the object coordinates from this texture coordinate into the vector of the noise texture. I'm just going to zoom out. I'm going to box select all of these nodes here. I'm just going to hit G just to give us a bit more space. I'll then drag this texture coordinate over to here. Maybe I can just neaten these nodes up a bit. So I'll just box select these nodes here. I'm going to hit G, X, and just drag them over to here. I'm going to change the W factor on this noise texture to 1. I'll change the W factor on this noise texture to 2. That's just to ensure that we've got completely random seeds. Maybe I can grab this noise texture over here. I'll then hit Shift A. I'm going to go Converter, and we'll choose Color Ramp, and I'll pop that in between there. I'll then set the position of the black flag to 0.25, and I'll set the position of the white flag to 0.75. And you can see we're getting a bit of colour variation on each individual block now. Excellent. I'm just going to neaten these nodes up a bit. So with this geometry node selected, I'm going to hit Control H, and that will hide all the empty sockets. I'll pop that down here. Maybe I'll drag this across over to here. I think I'm going to add one more layer of colour variation. So I'll select this noise texture here. I'll then hit Control Shift D to duplicate the node whilst maintaining the connection to the previous node. I'll pop that down here. I'll then hit Shift A, I'm going to go Converter, and I'll choose Color Ramp, and I'll pop that down here. I'm going to change the interpolation type on the Color Ramp from Linear to Ease. I'm going to change the scale on the noise texture to 2. I'll change the detail to 4, and I'll keep the roughness at 0.75. I'll then connect the factor from this noise texture into the factor of the Color Ramp. And before I connect this Color Ramp, I'm just going to box select these nodes here, and the noodle points. I hit G, X, just bring them across over to here. I'll then select this mixed color node. I'll hit Shift D to duplicate, and I'll pop it in between there. I'm going to change socket B to black. I'll then connect the color socket from this color ramp into the factor of this mixed color node. So before we add bump, we're just going to make a couple of changes here. So for this bottom noise texture, I'm going to set the W factor to 3. I'll also change the interpolation type for this middle color ramp to Ease. Maybe I'll select the color swatch on this mixed color, and I'll just make this a bit brighter, something around there. So now we just need to add bump, and we're going to have 2 levels of bump. So the first bump is going to be driven by this middle noise texture here, and the second level of bump is going to be driven by this cavity, grime and dirt mask here. So let's do that now. So I'm going to hit Shift A, I'm going to go Vector, and I'll choose bump, and I'll pop that there. I'll then connect the factor from this noise texture into the height of this bump node. I'll then connect the normal socket from this bump node into the normal socket, the principal BSDF. I'm going to set the distance on this bump node to 0.025. We're starting to get bump in our scene. Excellent. We'll now connect the cavity, grime and dirt mask into the bump. So I'll hit Shift A, I'm going to go Vector, and I'll choose bump, and I'll pop that down here. Shift A, we go Converter, and we'll choose Color Ramp, and I'll pop that down here. I'm going to connect the result from the cavity, grime and dirt mask into the factor of the color ramp. I'll then connect the color from the color ramp into the height of the bump node. I'm going to box select these 2 nodes here. I'll hit G, and I'll bring them across over to here. I'll then hold down Shift, right click and drag through this noodle just to add a reroute node, and I'll just drag this over to here just so we can see where it's going. I'll then connect the normal socket from this bump node into the normal socket of this bump node. I'll set the distance to 0.025. And on this colour ramp, I'm going to drag the black flag across to around about there. Maybe we'll set it to 0.25. Okay, that's looking nice and grimy. So now the only thing really left to do is dial in the settings. So the main two settings you want to concentrate on will be the two colour ramps, which are in your cavity, grime and dirt mask. And of course the colour of your wall. So if you're going for sandstone, these would be kind of a yellow tone, and this would be a darker yellow tone. We can probably change the mix type from this one to multiply. Now you can see that the masks work absolutely fine in cycles, but if we go to eevee, you'll see that the masks don't work at all. So I'm in material preview mode. I'm just going to reduce my shader editor window a minute. I'll then navigate to File, Save As, and I'm going to save my project as Like and Subscribe. Thanks folks, you absolute legends. And then click Save As. I'll navigate into my shader editor. I'm going to hit Control Space to enter full screen view. And I'm just going to neaten up these nodes, and I'll be right back. Okay, that's the final node structure. Just a bonus tip. Instead of having these solid colours here, you can always go Shift A, go Texture, and choose Image Texture. Then click Open. Select an image texture of your choice. Click Open. With the image texture selected, I'm just going to hit Control T to add a texture coordinate and a mapping node. I haven't got any UVs in my scene, so I'll select Object as the coordinates, and I'll change the image texture from flat to box. I'll just hit Control Spacebar to exit out of full screen. I'll just increase this window. And then, for example, I can connect this image texture into one of these color sockets. And now we've got image textures. If I go into rendered view, we should have the grime masks embedded into your image textures. So I've got one image texture in this slot here. You could add another one in here. You can add another image texture in here. It's best to keep this one set to black because that adds variation. And for example, for your moss or your lichen, you could add moss textures in these sockets here. I'm just going to box select these nodes here. I hit delete because I'm going to keep this 100% procedural. If you join me on Patreon as a free member, you'll have access to this file alongside other Blender files from previous tutorials. That's the episode in a nutshell. I hope you found this useful. If you did, please click like and subscribe. It really helps my channel. Have a great day, level up, and thanks for watching.